Hi there, you are listening to the Guitar Speak podcast. My name's Matt Wakeling and this is the show that I produce in Sydney, Australia, where I speak to leading guitar players from all around the world. Thank you so much for joining me for episode number 155. Now today I'm speaking to Canadian guitarist Shaun Verreault. Shaun is the frontman and lead guitarist of the band Wide Mouth Mason, Canadian band with gold records, major label signings, all that kind of stuff under its belt. And Shaun is a fantastic guitar player, synthesizing blues, roots, soul, funk influences into his own unique voice. Shaun joins us today to speak about his career, including his mind-boggling tri-slide style. It's a type of lap steel playing incorporating 3 slides on the fretting hand. It's crazy, you've got to hear it to believe it. We also hear about a life on the road and lessons learnt from sharing stages with AC/DC, the Rolling Stones, jams with Robert Randolph, and much more. I love the conversation I had with Shaun. He's super inspiring and articulate, and I know you're going to love this interview. This episode is brought to you by The Pedal Movie, a feature-length film all about effects pedals created by the music gear marketplace Reverb. I am super excited about this film. The Pedal Movie features nearly 100 interviews with people like Steve Vai, Peter Frampton, Jay Mascis, Billy Corgan, and more, including some of our Guitar Speak podcast alumni like Dweezil Zappa, Sarah Lipstate, Johnny Barmer, and Brian Wampler. Reverb's The Pedal Movie is available now on iTunes, Google Play, and Vudu. For more information, visit www.thepedalmovie.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by Fretboard Biology, the comprehensive online guitar course put together by Joe Elliott. Now, Joe is not only a fantastic guitar player, he draws on his years of experience as the ex-head of guitar at the Guitar Institute of Technology and also at the McNally Smith Music College. Here's a few words from Joe about the course.
If you're tired of wading through hundreds of random guitar videos and just want to become a better player, Fretboard Biology is your answer. Fretboard Biology is a self-paced, college-level program that'll give you the right instruction, in the right amounts, and in the right order. You'll learn the same information I taught to thousands of other guitar players over 30 years of teaching in top music colleges. If you want to make real progress with your guitar playing, then sign up for a free 7-day trial at fretboardbiology.com.
Shaun Verreault, welcome to the Guitar Speak podcast.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for jumping in. Now, we are speaking in early May 2021. What's happening specifically for gigs and that sort of thing, you know, as we're living in the pandemic?
A lot of not very much.
Okay.
Our province in particular, throughout COVID, was sort of a model for how to deal with it for a North American city. And then we, at some point in the last couple of months, fell quite behind. And I've had one round of vaccination, and I know a lot of people here have. It's sort of going by age group and you know how urgent it is for people to get it. There have been some people doing distanced gigs and obviously live streams throughout the entire pandemic. And I've done a couple of them, but there hasn't really been a return to live music. So I'm just tortured daily by my social media reminding me where I was a year ago, where I was 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and all the great gigs and friends and extended families that we'd all be seeing. But in many ways, I've enjoyed the woodshedding, the really getting a chance to dig into the instrument and practice for hours in a way that I wouldn't if I was gigging constantly. So yeah, I feel like there's light at the end of the tunnel. We had just put out a record. My band Wide Mouth Mason had put a record out, and our summer of beautiful blues and roots festivals that was all planned, of course, got canceled. And initially they moved everything to, okay, it'll happen the same weekend in 2020. And now those have been canceled as well. So I am waiting with bated breath and crossed fingers for when we can start to play live music again and see live music again.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about the album. That's I Want to Go With You that came out late 2019, I think.
That's right.
We'll definitely get to that. But your band, of course, is Wide Mouth Mason. And I guess for the best part of the last 30 years, you've been on the road gigging incessantly and releasing albums. So, yeah, it must be quite a shift the last year or so.
Yeah, it is. When I became a dad, I slowed down a lot of the, being gone for weeks at a time or months
Okay,
for a
yep.
time. But I think at this era of the band's existence, having formed in the sort of mid '90s and started putting out records in the later '90s, and there were I've lived those 200 shows a years of my life and love them and changed so much as a player and as a person from traveling that much and performing that much. But now I think it suits us really well to go play 3 or 4 shows in a row and then come back and be with our families and live life and then head out again. And it's a really nice balance and allows for a lot of creativity and just being a well-rounded human.
Yeah, that's super important. I love that balance. I'm a dad as well. I totally get that. So that's awesome.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. When you said you've been woodshedding a little more this past period, what have you been up to?
Well, I've done some soundtracking work on some films, and people have sent me stems to play just guitar tracks on. But the thing that I've mostly dedicated myself to as a player, I not since I was 21 years old and in a cover band had I really learned a lot of other people's music. Once we started, recording our own songs and touring, playing our own music, I would learn some other people's songs as I was inspired to. But I lost touch with the thing that I used to do when I was 14, 15 all the time, which was just to put on a record and put headphones on and imagine that I was in the band. Not to necessarily learn the other musicians' parts, but to, in this time of void of live music and collaboration with other musicians, to just put on, James Brown's Star Time box set and put the headphones on and not know what's going to come next, and just imagine I'm on stage and I have to play something complimentary and not too much, but find a part that fits. And as I've been developing further the style of lap steel that I've started to work on and develop, I really found that learning not only the changes to other people's songs, but trying to arrange them as solo performances where I'm playing the melody and the rhythm and all that stuff simultaneously, working through a really varied catalog and kind of making myself a deal that every day or two I would learn and post my version of some other song by somebody else. Taught me a lot of moves, man, and a lot of inversions, and I had to problem solve in a way that you don't when you're just improvising or just jamming or writing your own songs. You're not forced to go, okay, if I'm here and I need to get this note in the melody, what inversion facilitates that in the best way? And particularly on lap steel, where there's more ways for it to go wrong than to go right intonation wise. So it's really made me focus on that and learn a lot of great moves and patterns and changes and harmonizations for writing my own music.
Yeah. I've got to say I've started following your social media stuff, and I love your Instagram feed because there's all these great cover versions from Van Halen to 70s pop stuff. It's great, man. I'm really digging it.
Thanks, Matt.
Now, when you say there's more that can go wrong that can go right with Slide, you've made it 3 times as hard for yourself in that regard.
I have.
with this tri-slide technique. Let me back up a little bit further though. So when the first Wide Mouth Mason records came out, they're very blues rock, groove oriented. I don't think I was hearing a lot of slide on those records. When did slide become an important part of your style? Maybe just we'll start with the one slide to start with.
Yeah, I did start with the one. I grew up loving Hendrix and Prince were my two guys.
Okay.
And obviously Stevie Ray Vaughan was such a great gateway into all of blues history that when he really hit, and my guitar teaching me couldn't stand the weather.
Yep.
Stevie was so magnanimous in all of his interviews about, well, if you like me, you got to check out all the Kings and all these guys and my brother. And so I grew up loving that and was inspired to play by, the beginning of When Doves Cry and the end of Let's Go Crazy. We're just, okay, I need to get this in my life, whatever this is. And I pursued that style I was particularly drawn to the sort of chord melody, filling a couple roles at once, role of guitar players like Jimmy did in The Experience and Stevie Ray did. And the way that Andy Summers growing up in the 80s as a Police fan, like how did they make three people sound so big? And often the guitar part is a mix of melody and rhythm at the same time. So I really threw myself into that. And the first few records of ours that did really well, there was no slide playing at all. But we were playing in a lot of environments where we were exposed to slide players and seeing them and hearing them. And on our second or third, depending on how you look at independent releases versus major label releases record, there was a song that just kind of asked for a slide part. It was needing that sound more than me wanting to shoehorn it into something. And I just realized how particular the intonation and the nuance is, where there's no just putting your finger in the right place and having the fret complete it for you. And I really struggled to record a very single notey kind of thing on one song on our second or third record, but found it really compelling and human voice-like, and realized that once I climbed some of the enormous mountain that had just presented itself in front of me, that there was going to be some lyricism and some control that I wouldn't be able to access any other way than figuring it out. But it was pretty eye-watering, and learning how to do it in the studio for one song versus then standing up on a dark stage in front of people and trying to do it. There were many live shows, and I'm glad there isn't, there weren't iPhones and there wasn't footage of me taking my baby steps into the world of slide. But you kind of have to do that. You have to immerse yourself in that foreign language and go, I'm just going to start doing it, and I'll hit the ditch a little bit less each time and start to make my way with it. And then becoming aware of Sonny Landreth a little bit. Actually, the first slide thing that really turned me on before I even picked it up was do you remember in Guitar Player magazine, they used to have the sound pages, those floppy records that,
absolutely.
And there was one that was a David Tronzo song.
Yeah, I remember that one.
Playing just ridiculous slide that I'd never heard a slide sound like before. And that was the genesis of thinking that you could do more with it than trying to do a less inspiring version of what Elmore James or Muddy Waters did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Oh man, the sound page, that brings back memories. That was such a cool thing.
Yeah.
A record inside the magazine. That's super cool.
A square, piece of
a square record at that.
Whatever plastic that was floppy. And just because there was so much less content, you couldn't just YouTube someone if you wanted to learn how to play something, and you couldn't just go on Instagram and check out stuff, or the guitar player site and look at all of their past content. Every month when I'd get that magazine, it would be pouring through it and memorizing. I could probably recall what page comes after what page
Okay.
in a bunch of guitar magazines from about 1989 or 90 to the 2000s easy.
Okay. Awesome. Very cool.
Yeah.
Hey, what kind of stuff were you doing when you were building up your chops? Like, what were you doing to get better at it? Like, you mentioned the Tronzo track was an inspiration, but were there particular pieces you were trying to nail or exercises?
It was kind of like when you're first starting to play acoustic and you first become aware of the F chord, and you know it's going to hurt, and you know you're not going to accomplish it more than half the time you set out to do it. So slide was sort of that when it first started for me again, where I would close my eyes and play an open string, and then try to slide up to the octave and be comfortable, to not hide behind vibrato, but to be able to choose judiciously how much vibrato and how wide I wanted it to be. The muscles required for bottleneck are not completely divorced from the ones for playing regular style in the way that lap steel is, where that's a whole other set of muscles. But I would just sort of sing along with things. One thing that it revealed was how interesting it is to approach the guitar horizontally, thinking of moving up and down one string versus moving vertically across groups of strings. Because all of us, the downside to learning finger positions and boxes and patterns is that people tend to stay in them and let the muscle memory guide them to the next note, rather than melodically what they're in pursuit of, and just to do patterns by rote. We all do it. So the early days of slide were a lot of playing up and down on one string for as long as I could, and trying to make each note in tune, and then giving myself one more string, the string next to it, to either make chords out of, or to try and play again up and down horizontally in tune on. So it was really good training, like Mr. Miyagi style training for almost every other thing I ended up doing on guitar. But there was no way around the fact that it was going to be slow, grueling process, and that there were still always going to be notes that I didn't mean to hit, or it revealed to me in the same way that a drummer having to play to a click track in the studio for the first time becomes aware of, oh, I thought my meter was 100% and it's not. Sure. And this is proving it to me, that hearing myself play slide made me listen a lot more closely to my intonation and my tuning.
Has that impacted your regular or conventional guitar playing as well?
Very much so.
Yeah.
Very much. Well, and all those guys that I loved, particularly, Stevie's right hand, Jimmy's right hand, when they wanted to get more expressive, they would hit harder. Where slide is like, learning about quantum physics or something. It's you only have so hard that you can hit it before it just bottoms out and doesn't make any sound. But you discover there's all of this range underneath zero that is equally as effective as all the range that's above zero. So the intricacy and the touch sensitivity of what's the gentlest I can touch this and make it make sound, and finding all the range between that and a regular pick strike taught me a lot about what both my right hand and my left hand can evoke from the guitar if I'm using all of those techniques rather than just the really hard ones that I grew up playing 13s and hitting it hard to be like Stevie.
Yeah.
Slide was like, I immediately felt more comfortable with bare fingers on my right hand to be
Okay.
able
Yeah.
to mute and make sure that I wasn't. That was one thing I got hit to pretty quick, was muting the extraneous noises and those weird
Mm.
ghostly sounds that can happen if you're not aware of muting with your palm on your right hand or your other fingers on your left hand. That I got pretty quickly, but then it was just putting the rest of it into practice with precision and decision making.
Okay. What about tunings? Did you, I guess before slide, were you playing in standard most of the time? Did you start using open tunings at all when you moved to slide? What was going on there?
I've having become a fan of Michael Hedges, I found myself tuning my acoustic into open tunings a lot and
Hmm.
doing almost like meditating or trance-like stuff of moving one note around or two notes around against the backdrop of all the other open notes in open A or open E or something. It wasn't something I had any proficiency with playing chords other than one finger bars or partial things that I was just stumbling upon by moving around. And it would take quite some time to decode that. Most of the slide playing I did when I was just learning was in standard tuning.
Hmm.
And, the D, G, and B strings are a triad when you're in standard tuning, and they're
Yeah.
very similar to the backbone of what open E, D, C, any of those are.
Uh-huh.
So one thing I'd learned from playing in a trio pre-slide was that oftentimes, you don't want to blow playing all six strings until you need a moment of bigger impact in the song. Like save that for the chorus, but
Hmm.
play the verses just with two and three string chords so that the bass is holding down the bottom, and so that you can create, peaks and valleys without having any other instruments to add. That I
Yeah,
would
cool.
save full bar chords for a moment of impact and play the rest of the time with two and three note chords. So
Hmm.
I was already doing that, and so I transferred that to slide as well, going, I don't always have to be playing all six strings. In fact, it gets muddier in a lot of situations if I do that, where you can you know give the impression of a full seventh chord by playing a flat seventh and a third. So that can be more powerful
Hmm.
sometimes than playing the entire thing.
Sure. How about lap steel? When did that come into your arsenal?
Not until many, many years later. I think I was probably in my late 30s before I ever sat down to try one in earnest and do anything other than, Bugs Bunny sort of theremin sounds, when I'd found
Yeah.
myself sitting in front of one. Um, and I did a series of gigs with some dear friends from my hometown where I grew up. And at the end of it, one of the guitar players who hadn't really been playing much, but these gigs got him playing again, gave me a really generous gift of a lap steel that he'd carved himself and
Oh, wow.
installed the pickup on some quarters that he drilled holes in, and
Oh,
I
that's
went,
cool.
here, I thank you for arranging these gigs. I want you to have this. And I really gave it a go in the traditional fashion with a bar, like a Stevens bar in my left hand, and just felt like I alluded to before, the muscles required to do lap steel are, the difference between swimming and walking. It's a totally different mechanic from playing even bottleneck on regular
Hmm.
guitar. So I was really getting into ruts where I was just like, well, I just sound like an out of tune version of insert steel guitar player here. I was really struggling to find my own voice with it. So I would use it for sound effecty things or that kind of stuff, or as a pad behind something where you just kind of shake the bar a little bit and have it, have an atmospheric sort of a background noise that's diatonic.
Hmm.
Um, but as I've been developing my bottleneck style, having heard Sonny Landreth, and we're friends with I'm not sure if they've toured Australia, but a band called Big Wreck, and they're guitar player Ian Thornley showed me at some gigs we did together that he was pressing down behind the slide in order to
Yeah, yeah.
play different melodies and different kinds of chords. And I evolved that over a bunch of time playing with it to just think of my pinky as, or think of the slide as my pinky. It just
Mhm.
is made out of a different material, but rather than thinking of pressing notes down behind the slide, I just sort of think of it as that's whatever my pinky would do, the slide will cover.
Mhm.
And it was one day when I was in a studio producing a record, and that lap steel was living there, and I just picked it up that day, and it dawned on me that if I had another thing on another finger, I could do with it what I do with my other fingers when I play bottleneck slide, which is
Okay.
to cover some other notes or play, a tone apart and play melodies. And to my astonishment, it kind of worked even that first time with
Mhm.
a slide that didn't really fit on one finger and holding another slide in between my index finger and thumb. It was like, okay, this is promising. I'm going to take this lap steel home again and
Uh-huh.
see what I can do. And then I went down all kinds of fun but ridiculous wormholes of trying to find out what fingers I should put stuff on, what finger. I thought if I put something on every finger, then it's just a gimmick. I might as well just use my four fingers to like I was playing guitar.
Uh-huh.
And I've always loved um, Roland Kirk and Charlie Hunter and Stanley Jordan and people who their entire approach to the instrument was unique, but they would have been unique on any instrument that they played. Like it couldn't be something that was just a gimmick for the sake of, hey, look how weird this looks when I work harder to make this sound the same as if I was playing a regular guitar. I identified pretty quickly that I could, if I worked at it, would potentially be able to do stuff I couldn't do any other way, which was to have one note sliding in one direction and another
Mhm.
note sliding in another direction, where things could resolve with one note going up and one note going down and one note staying the
Yeah,
same.
cool.
So I tried rings and ends of bolts and parts of boats and all kinds of slides on different hands, and I came to the conclusion that I was going to need something to mute with, again, to kill those ringy noises
Ah,
that you
yeah,
don't
yeah.
want. So I was going to leave my pinky empty, and um, I needed some room between the fingers that had slides on them in order to just have the real estate to move around and to not weigh my hand down with pounds and pounds of materials. Um, so what seemed to work the best for me, and what I'm doing to this day, is to have a slide on my ring finger, a slightly shorter slide on my index finger, and then a slide on my thumb. And I was using just regular bottlenecks for that for the longest time, and having to kind of catch the string with the end of the slide without it, just being my bare finger sticking
Uh-huh.
out the top of the slide.
Yeah.
And I stumbled on a builder called the Rock Slide. It's this guy Danny Songhurst who makes slides that I use, and the Joey Landreth and Ariel Posen and um, Nathaniel Murphy and a whole bunch of players use the Rock Slides now. And the ones that he makes there is the option of having a ball tip, so it's a rounded tip on the end of the slide without it being open, which was a complete game changer for my style of developing with three slides at once, because then I could hammer on and pull off with just this very particular, almost rounded point that came
Ah,
to.
okay. Yep.
And when I'm using, much of the time, my third finger is like a bar. It's like a capo, and my index finger and thumb are playing the melody and the stuff on top of it. But
Yep.
I can also use my thumb or first finger as the bar, and because of the rounded tip of the slides, push down with my third finger or my index finger behind the slide,
Mhm.
and make minor chords and seventh chords and that kind of stuff out of that. So
Yeah, cool.
um,
Wow.
that that was about 6 years ago that I had that first epiphany at the studio. And And ever since, like I said with Bottleneck, I just started showing up at gigs and going, listen, guys, a bunch of tonight is gonna suck. I'm a person who just moved to France and doesn't speak French, basically, and I'm gonna learn not by falling asleep to records that are playing and taking French classes, but I'm just gonna immerse myself in it and have no way out but this. And thankfully, the people I was playing with were patient and inspired by the fact that after, having a band that's done well and being a recognized player in my scene, that I would just go back to the drawing board and throw caution to the wind and show up and make a mess of it again for a bit. And there would be parts every night where I'd look down and go, oh my God, I don't know how to get out of this hole I've gotten into. But there would be a few times every gig where I'd look down and go, wait, what's that? That's a new seventh chord. I never.
Wow.
Oh,
awesome.
wait, what's that? That's how I can get from here to here. And it was just so exciting and dangerous and fun to not know after all these years of having a pretty good idea most of the time.
That is super cool. I got to say, I really admire you jumping in when you say that. That you've done it later in your career, or after being an established musician. We're talking gold records, major label. Contracts, that kind of stuff. You've already established, obviously worked super hard to establish your voice as a guitar player, and then you do this. So just to back up on the mechanics, so for lap steel, obviously your fretting hand, well, to use, for want of a better term, your left hand, your pinky is facing the nut, obviously.
My pinky is facing the nut. That's right.
The thumb is facing, say, the bridge. So your pinky's mainly the muting finger because that's bare.
Yeah, it's 99% of the time it's the muting extraneous noises on the strings I don't want to play, or helping me position the slide that's on my ring finger, in the right place.
Yep. And then
my middle finger doesn't have anything on it. I do sometimes use it to pluck behind the slide to play harmonics and stuff, but that's a work in progress. Right now, it's kind of the most underutilized thing. And then my index finger has a slide that comes just to the top of the kind of middle knuckle, so that I can bend it to play notes against when my ring finger is holding this as a bar or as a capo. My first finger can pretty comfortably get from the first to the fifth string to add a note one fret away from it, or two or three or four frets away from it. And then my thumb also has something on it. So like the Canadian guitarist Jeff Healey, I grew up watching play and then played some shows with as we got older.
Oh, wow.
I was always impressed by the reach from his pinky to his thumb was like a sixth or seventh sometimes, depending on where he was on the neck. And I'm afforded that kind of range now with having these slides on different fingers.
That's awesome. Yeah. I saw Healy, he came to Australia in the early 90s, and like everyone, I was just blown away. But that reach was a huge thing, because the same thing, your hand on above the fretboard, you've got your thumb in play, which he used to use for bending and all sorts of things. So that's cool.
Yeah.
With your technique on slide, on one of your covers videos, playing a Van Halen tune. What was the was it Hot for Teacher? Or
I've done Panama and Hot for Teacher and Unchained. And man, Panama and Hot for Teacher were almost like dares to myself, just to see if I could figure out a way. I've experimented before with having something on my right hand that I could tap with, whether it was a little slide on my pinky or a ring or something. But the volume of the thick slides on my left hand, I could never match up with the volume of what I would finger tap. So I realized that I'd have to, rather than finger tapping, like for the beginning of Hot for Teacher, that I just have to figure out a way to finger pick that and hammer on and pull off with the slide fast enough to make it seem like that's all happening when it's supposed to. So that was a huge one. I think that's how we, as I've been learning these other songs or getting techniques in my head, I've just figured out that if you make the very hardest thing you can do that day the second hardest thing the day after by learning something even harder than that, or
Okay.
trying to attain a technique that's even more demanding than that the next day, that by the third or fourth day, that thing that was the hardest thing 3 or 4 days ago becomes pretty fluid and easy because it's
Okay.
been pushed down the scale a little
Yeah.
bit. And your brain wraps around it because it's so busy trying to process the new thing that you're challenging yourself to do. Um, I I found those Van Halen songs and ones where there's a lot of melodic movement. Like I arranged 50 ways to leave your lover
Yeah.
to play the melody and the chord changes at the same time,
Yeah,
where
it's really
they
cool.
were just brain stretchers, but a really satisfying and rewarding puzzle to try and crack. Because it at first I'd go, well, Cliffs of Dover, how the hell am I going to play that on a lap steel?
Yeah.
Well, you have the added bonus of I mainly play an open D or C, so I have a major chord there. So any of
Mhm.
the arpeggios that Eric would do were mostly under my fingers, and
Yep.
I would just kind of make it a thing that I would work at. And COVID, I mean, I had some hours to dedicate it in between daddying and my day gig at a guitar company here that I was working remotely and doing. So I would just throw myself into it and not stop until I figured it out. There was one time I posted a song when Blake Mills's most recent record came out, and posted a version of myself playing it, and someone went, "Hey, Blake, check this out," and he went, "Haha, that's great. Now do Far Sickness," which is a really beautiful, dense piano song with these really close voiced chords in it. And he said it as a joke, like, "Oh, now just do this thing that'd be impossible on lap steel." And I just went, "Oh, okay, I'm gonna do it." So two days later, I had worked up an arrangement of it and posted it. And I just got in that mindset where I'd look for songs that I thought would must be nearly impossible to play on a lap steel, and try and figure out a way to do them, and not stop until I solved enough problems or made enough mistakes that I kind of had a grip on it.
I hope you are enjoying today's interview. Now, this podcast is brought to you by The Pedal Movie, a feature-length film all about effects pedals created by the music gear marketplace Reverb. Now, you know we love guitar pedals here on the Guitar Speak podcast, and we're super excited on the release of this film. The Pedal Movie explores how effects pedals and their builders have shaped modern music and guitar playing over time, from the fuzz pedal experiments of the Rolling Stones and Jimi Hendrix through the shoegaze and indie rock of the 90s and up to the modern day use of effects. Reverb also speaks with builders and leaders from more than 50 pedal brands to answer the big question, how did guitar pedals get so big? Reverb's The Pedal Movie is available now on iTunes, Google Play and Vudu. For more info, check out thepedalmovie.com. Today's show is also brought to you by Fretboard Biology. Today's episode is also brought to you by Fretboard Biology, the comprehensive online guitar course put together by master guitar teacher Joe Elliott. Now, I was a beta tester for the course, and as a music educator myself, I was very impressed by the logical layout and format of the course. Heavyweight guitarists such as Brett Garsed and Greg Koch have also endorsed the program, so check it out at www.fretboardbiology.com. Okay, back to our interview. Hey, you've shared gigs and stages with a whole bunch of bands. So Jeff Healey, opening for AC/DC, ZZ Top. You got any stories or any lessons learnt from rubbing shoulders with some of these musicians?
Oh man, that's a great question. So many things musically, from watching those bands, and to say nothing of just the, you know, we were really fortunate in that we started filling clubs ourselves and then going on the road with bands that were filling bigger clubs. And then um, we went on a tour opening for George Thorogood in sort of converted vaudeville theaters around the west coast of the US and got comfortable there. And then the first big tour we got was opening for AC/DC in arenas. And or sorry, for ZZ Top in arenas was the first one.
Hmm.
And we learned so much from watching those performances in each of those different levels about, in a small club, you can be dense and frenetic and do a lot of little things.
Yeah.
But the bigger the room gets, the grander your gestures have to get, musically and performance wise and
Okay.
otherwise. But the more there is swirling around in the air, so you need to have more space between what you do for it to connect to the person in the back of the room,
Hmm.
because there's going to be stuff echoing and other things going on. So um, those were huge lessons learned from those people. The pacing of the show, the when to do a faster one, when to do a slow one,
Hmm.
when to leave space in between the songs, and when not to. Um, Tonally, I found my tone getting cleaner the bigger the shows got, which was
Okay.
very much inspired by we 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 got a call after we had finished a tour all across Canada, and we were pretty worn out, and we were going home going, look, Slash has dropped out of the AC/DC Stiff Upper Lip tour. If you can be in Florida in 3 days, you can open 3 or 4 shows, and if it goes all right, they might give you a week or so.
Hmm.
And we went down and did it, and the audience was expecting Slash, because of course they're not going to advertise to a sold out performance
Sure.
that, oh, by the way, the opener is going to be a different band. They're not,
Yeah. Yeah.
no promoter is going to spend money on that. So
Yeah.
we walked out to Expectation, which quickly turned to Vocal Disappointment, and
Yeah.
then
Wow.
had to play on from there. And we did well enough with the crowds. We had been in enough situations from growing up playing bars in the Canadian prairies to stare a crowd down and
Hmm.
play authoritatively until they liked you. And we just did that, uh, such that AC/DC and their crew, who we were very low maintenance dudes to be on tour with, said, "Why
Uh,
don't you just do the next 7 weeks with us and just open the entire North American tour?" And watching Malcolm's right hand every night,
yeah. Wow.
and again, that thing we talked about with how the most powerful chord sometimes is just 2 or 3 notes,
Hmm.
and the timing and the way that you hit it, um, that was hugely influential on everyone in the band. How powerful and potent, and being on stage when they were playing and going, it's barely overdriven, this tone.
Mm.
It's
Yeah.
it's a big, clean, transparent, nothing to hide behind tone. And the growl and the snark of it comes from the attitude. It comes from the way it's played. And everyone around this entire echoey, not made for audio stadium can
Hmm.
hear exactly what he's doing, and nothing's lost.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Wow.
that was hugely inspiring to
Uh huh.
me as a player, and taught me a lot about tone and note choices, and yeah, the narrative arc of a solo and a performance, and
Hmm.
and all that. And the biggest thing as humans, I think we learned, um, was watching. There was a night we played with the Stones where Mick had a flu and could barely stand up before the show, and then went out and ruled like a god, and no one would know that he was sick.
Uh
And
huh.
then walk off stage, and people would pick him up and carry him in a heap to the dressing room after. Or same thing with Angus, where he would run around the stage at full speed for 3 hours and then be carried off by 2 people would make a bridge with their arms, and they just dump Angus in it.
Wow.
And he didn't just do that in the major centers. He would do that everywhere, every night, because he knew that it was someone's first time seeing this band, and he was gonna empty his reserves to give them everything that he had. That was a huge thing, because you see some bands that start to phone it in or imagine where they'll be on the golf course the next day after a
Hmm.
certain point in their careers. And those guys were just so dedicated and all in and playing as if their heroes were in the wings, still watching them as even at the decades into a massive career that they were still, it was that important to them was hugely inspiring.
Yeah, that is awesome. There's a very cool video of you meeting Robert Randolph at a NAMM show and
Hmm.
ending up jamming together. Tell me about that.
Yeah, well, I'm really fortunate that my day gig is an amazing one. I work in business development at a company called Graph Tech Guitar Labs. So we
Oh,
make
okay.
the nuts and saddles
Yeah, yeah.
and bridges and machine on I think some things, some of the guitars I can see behind you.
Hmm.
Um, and I've been doing that for about 5 years, and it's so much fun every day to work with and collaborate with and design things with. I mean, every major brand, every medium-sized brand, and so many one-person luthier, artisan guitar makers, bass makers, ukulele makers around the world. Um, it's just I nerd out on guitar stuff all day and pinch
Uh-huh.
myself that I get to collaborate with these people whose work I've grown up playing. And one of the things that entails was going to the NAMM show, um, and running our booth, and we were part of this artist event. And I had just I've been playing my guitars with those nut extender things on them for a while, and obviously
Okay.
that first lap steel I have that was carved and given to me, and I'd gotten a '59 Fender Champion lap steel. It's a student model that
Oh,
has
wow.
numbers as fret markers,
Okay.
but the pickup in it is incredible sounding. And so I had just before we went to NAMM bought the Robert Randolph signature PV
Oh,
power
yeah.
slide.
Yep.
Um, I originally liked the idea. If you haven't seen it, it looks like a scimitar or something because there's a strap that you can use to play it standing up.
Yeah,
It's
they
not
look
like a
cool.
mellow bar where it's tilted, but you can wear the strap. And
Mm.
obviously knew of Robert's playing and dug it. So he showed up and we started talking, and I showed him my champ and told him that I had just bought one of his lap steels. And he went, "Well, I have one in a gig bag right here." And we were doing this event where Steve Vai's guitar tech Thomas Nordegg was swapping out people's tuners to the ratio tuners that Graph Tech makes. We were doing an
Okay.
event where players could come in and get them put on their guitars and try them out. And so Thomas had a couple amps that he was going through, and he just went, "Well, Robert, why don't you plug into this one? And Shaun, why don't you plug into this one?" And you both have. So we just started jamming. We just started going for it, and he was bemused and interested in the three slides that I was playing with, and
I bet he
his
was.
his left hand is like a gospel singer. That's seeing him do that close up and how precise his intonation is of when he's again going up and down one string mostly and
Okay.
just singing with it. And we looked up and it was like a half hour later, and we'd been playing the same blues song for that amount of time, and we looked up and oh my, there's Vernon Reed, and all these people are hanging out watching this go down. So
Yeah.
um, we've since stayed in touch, and I play that lap steel all the time. I see Robert at most NAMMs, and we message each other about cool stuff that we're playing. And
Awesome.
I actually cut the horn off of my Randolph lap steel, because I discovered that I wasn't going to use it with the strap to play standing
Okay.
up, and would have it on a stand most of the time. And the rhino horn on it, if people have seen them before, would always kind of get in the way. So after a gig one night in Toronto, my friend with a woodworking shop said, "Well, come by. We'll take a coffee can lid and draw a perfect arc on one part of it and just saw that sucker off." And
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I think Robert was pretty tickled that A, I sawed it off, and B, that it still left his signature on the guitar intact
Nice.
with the way that the arc worked. But
Yeah.
yeah, that was a ball, and I got to do some stuff with a bunch of other great sacred steel players like the Campbell brothers, which are, there's 2 or 3 amazing steel guitar players at a time in that band. We got to jam together at a blues fest a couple of years ago, and it was really inspiring, and gave me a boost when guys like that, who are so amazing at traditional lap steel playing, were not only, kind of inspired by this technique, but also really complimentary. Like, hey man, you're doing this is not just you throwing something different at it so it looks weird when you're doing it. There's actually some stuff you can do that is novel and adding to the conversation. So it was nice to get a vote of approval from people in that world who are just masters of it.
For sure.
And inspiring to keep going and see what else I could stumble on. Yeah.
Awesome, man. So cool. Hey, let's talk about the latest Wide Mouth Mason record. I want to go with you, which, as we said, it came out late 2019. You were all good to go to start touring on it, but gigs it'll come. But gigs aside, man, the record's fantastic. I've read reviews of the album that call it a return to your blues roots. Is that accurate?
I feel, well, it definitely is. Our first record was so informed by all of the stuff that we had been playing in the clubs coming up, and definitely again the Hendrix and Stevie Ray and that side of us was really explored, and we loved so many different styles of music that there would always be blues was like the middle 10 letters of our alphabet, so it was always there in everything we did, but we loved exploring other influences because our philosophy was always, there's only 3 of us and I'm singing lead all the time, so we can only get so far from sounding like us no matter what we attempt. If we tried to do polka music, we would swing it the way we swing it, and it would be me singing it, so it would sound like us playing it. So we followed our muse all over the place, from the most Sly and the Family Stone kind of funk record that we could make to the heaviest record and down tune that we could make, and really explored that all over the place. And on all of those records there would be bluesy stuff, but it wasn't necessarily the single that would get picked from that record that would get a bunch of promotion behind it. But I Want to Go With You was the first record that I wrote playing the lap steel this way. And when I started writing the songs for it, and we started jamming on them, my drummer forever in the band, Safwan, and I could only comfortably paint in primary colors. I could play 2 or 3 chords reliably in tune. So I was starting to write around those 2 or 3 chords, which led me really far down Charlie Patton and Sun House and Book of White, and listening to all that stuff and being so moved by it, but wanting to make sure that I wasn't speaking in a voice that wasn't mine. I didn't want to sing about crossroads and things that aren't my life, that aren't me. So I thought, well, it would be interesting to make a record that's musically inspired by and based on these kind of stomp blues songs, but to steer as clear as possible from those subject matters, and to be true to who we are, and not infringe upon anybody else's identity by making it lyrically and melodically informed by all the other stuff that we are and who we've been. So that definitely got it. Once it became clear that the framework of songs were mostly going to be blues based, we really went down that path and enjoyed doing that. Yeah,
cool. I guess the irony is you end up with a more authentic blues expression when you're focusing on those personal themes rather than sing about hellhounds or whatever wild animals you don't have any contact with in real life. So that's
That's
cool.
right.
I
Yeah,
like
and
that.
we went for the recording method, and I think a lot of bands say they're going to do this, and then hear the results and decide that they're going to ease back and do some other things. Where we thought a lot of those records from those eras that we'd love would be 30 or 40% improvised in the studio, where we'd have a pretty good idea of what the verse was and the chorus was, and maybe some other thing, but not 100% sure what the arrangement would be or what would happen. And our bassist that we had uh, left the band right before then, so we actually tracked it with me playing lap steel and singing, and my drummer playing in a open room where we could still have eye contact with each
Hmm.
other. And we added the bass to it later, and
Oh,
we
okay.
everything on it is first or second take. There are
Awesome.
very few overdubs beside the bass being overdubbed afterwards. um, and it allowed us to be really free. If I went off on a tangent, he could follow me. No bass player had to try and look at my three slides
Yeah,
and figure
okay.
out what chord I was playing. They could just
Yeah,
overdub after.
that's
And
cool. Yeah.
so we really underthought and let ourselves be inspired by the moment.
That's so cool. I love that. In fact, I think you've answered one of my questions when you say there's minimal overdubs, because I'm wondering some of your tones, I mean a lot of the tones are ginormous. There's this totally throaty, drivey, screaming, dirty sound going on, but there's a lot
Yeah.
of clarity going on as well. Are you like multi-amping, or if it's a dry signal going through? How are you getting your guitar so three-dimensional if it's one take?
Good question. When I played most of the record on a Gretsch Honey Dripper resonator guitar, and then the Robert Randolph PV Power Slide lap steel,
Hmm.
and um, both of them retain quite a bit of clarity when they go through any kind of amp. Um, and both times the vocal mic would be there as well, picking out some of the
Okay.
string sounds as I was
Yeah, yeah,
as I
yeah.
was doing
Okay,
them.
that makes sense.
Um, and some of it comes down to there's a pedal maker, and the company is called Gooch Effects, out of Philadelphia. And he had made me a couple pedals. We became friends, and he just started sending me stuff. And he made me one called the Verreault Drive for my last name,
Love it.
and one called the Freemason Fuzz for the band Wide Mouth Mason. And both of
Uh-huh.
them, while being one is obviously an overdrive and one is a fuzz, but both of them are really great at retaining. You can hear all the notes in the chord. They don't
Mm.
necessarily mush into one, um, but they do make, the fuzz is a really big, throaty, righteous fuzz, and the Verreault Drive is really touch sensitive. Um, and I played through a beautiful Tremolux belonging to the Ryan Dahl, the guy whose studio we made it at, who co-produced it with us and engineered it all. And um, something about that combination um, just really nailed that. Where if we wanted to hear more of the clarity, we'd have the mic on the resonator, but if we wanted more dirt, we'd have another mic on the cabinet that the resonator was plugged into an amp and plugged into. Um, and it was sequestered so that it wouldn't feed back when I was playing the resonator
Mm-hmm.
particularly.
Yep.
And it just worked. Ryan's really great at getting guitar tones, and um, so many of the producers and engineers we worked with have been amazing at us being able to reference a recording and go, at the end of House Burning Down on Electric Ladyland, what the oh yeah 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 I can get that tone for you. So they'd help us sculpt that stuff a
That's
lot.
cool. Very nice. There's some yeah, so many great moments. Let's talk through a couple. Modern Love is a great Bowie cover.
Oh yeah.
And you just sit on chord one most of the time. I love that.
I've been having grown up playing in just one band, from when I was 11, starting to play with Safwan as a drummer, to well into my 30s before I ever really played with anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
I started putting this series of shows together in Vancouver where I'd invite people who'd never played together before to play at a blues club or a jazz club. And we wouldn't talk about what we were going to do. We would just get on stage and start going
Mm-hmm.
and have to make it up. And some of the
Nice.
time I'd find myself just improvising lyrics and making stuff up, but other times you'd start a groove and just start singing a Prince song over it or a Hendrix song. And one of the nights, I just found myself singing Modern Love, and I love the original version of it,
Yeah.
but I realized it would work really well over just like a superstition groove kind of a
Yeah.
one chord blues stomp. And it's really fun to play, to watch people go, oh, this is cool. It's vaguely familiar. Oh my God, it's that song. So we'd actually not recorded a cover for a proper record before, but
Okay.
this felt like we gave it enough of our own spin to include in the other stuff, and it felt like it fit.
Nice. The song Anywhere has some really cool harmonics in the intro. Is that the behind the slide harmonics idea you were talking
It's
about?
they're sort of like the right hand Lenny Bro
Oh,
thing,
okay.
where
Okay.
your
Yep.
index finger
Index and the
touches
thumb.
12 frets above the note and your thumb
Okay.
picks it, but I'm doing it with my left hand playing slide notes. Yeah, so it does add a sort of a ghostly quality to it,
Yeah.
and makes it ring differently because it's ringing on both sides of the slide. You can hear the strings ringing on both
Mm.
sides. Um, and definitely that song was the most pop of all the other songs that were on it, but the
Uh-huh.
resonator and the girthy tone of the lap steel kind of tied it together with those
Yeah. Yeah.
other more bluesy jams.
Yeah. Nice. Hey, your vocal is killing it. Yeah, I mean, we're obviously talking guitars on the Guitar Speak podcast, but I love your vocals, and I guess you pulling off the tri-slide stuff plus this super expressive singing that you're doing is quite a feat.
Thank you.
Hey,
Well, it goes back to what you said about did starting to learn bottleneck affect the way that I played regular guitar, and learning slide changed me as a singer, especially learning lap steel, because again, I think I had a default vibrato before that I
okay,
not only that I would do, but was the only one I could do.
yeah,
It was a muscle memory vibrato that I grew up singing with, and that's what I had. And spending so much intent and focus on my slide vibrato taught me a lot about vocal vibrato, and
hmm,
when I could choose to just confidently sit in the middle of the note without shaking it at all
uh-huh,
when I wanted to apply vibrato, and would it be big waves moving slowly or little waves moving quickly. And I got a lot more confident, and there are some notes that are just more comfortable to sing than others,
hmm,
um, one after the other. And again, slide playing made me so comfortable singing notes that would have been in between the givener
yeah,
part of your
okay,
voice and the relaxed part of your voice, that can be kind of hit and miss as a singer. Um, so yeah, it very much informed that, and having to learn how to sing those songs and play them at the same time was a challenge, to have the steel so that you're not looking down all the time while you're performing for people,
sure,
because it's hard to engage with them. So um, again, I just find myself, after we wrote and recorded the record, um, I find myself trying to sit and play not looking, closing my eyes or looking up. And again, it just went back to being seasick and out of tune for the first bunch of that time, where I realized how much of what I was relying on was what I could see. And I know from freestyling or going off on tangents on regular guitar that when you close your eyes, that's when, even at gigs, when you have those moments where you're so in the zone and you close your eyes and you kind of come to a few minutes later
hmm,
and realize that you've been playing the most expressively that you could ever play, the most unreserved and unguarded, and just letting the music speak through you, then you kind of shake your head after, like someone waking up in a TV show from a dream, going, "Oh, whoa, what was I just doing?" That comes from those moments where you're not thinking about what you're doing, not watching what you're doing, and you're just closing your eyes and going. I had to work to be able to do that and sing at the same time, but it was a fun challenge. It was fun to try and figure out, how am I going to do this at the same time as this, and how do you rub your tummy and pat your head and walk and talk at the same time. Our brains are capable of being stretched if we decide to stretch them.
Absolutely, and you've done that and continue to do that and expand your voice as a musician. And I think that's fantastic. That's super inspiring. And Shaun, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been fantastic talking about all this stuff. And I just want to rush off and play my guitar now, which is I think the
my
best
work here is done. Then
yeah, the best.
I'm so pleased.
Outcome.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Matt. It's been a pleasure, and I think that would be my motto is if you keep trying, you'll be able to do it. So try stuff that's outlandish that you can't imagine yourself doing, and eventually you'll get there.
Awesome. Shaun, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, brother.
All right, there you go. Hope you enjoyed today's conversation. Now, this podcast was brought to you by The Pedal Movie, the feature-length film all about effects pedals, created by Reverb. Reverb's The Pedal Movie is available now on iTunes, Google Play, and Voodoo. For more information, visit thepedalmovie.com. The show was also brought to you by Fretboard Biology, the comprehensive online guitar course put together by ex-head of guitar at GIT, Joe Elliott. Check out fretboardbiology.com for more information. Alrighty then, you have been listening to the Guitar Speak podcast. My name is Matt Wakeling, and as the legendary German rocker Michael Schenker once told me,
keep rocking, keep on rocking.
Keep on rocking indeed. Thanks for tuning in. I'll catch you next time. Bye now.